Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama,
Hare Krishna devotees, please accept my humble obeisances. All good to Prabhupada. Welcome devotees to our evening Bhagavad Gita circle, Wednesday evening at 6 o'clock. And we will be continuing with Bhagavad Gita, chapter 2, verse 27, by His Grace Balabhadra Bhattacharya Prabhu from ISKCON Atlanta. Hare Krishna Prabhu. Accept my obeisances. All good to Prabhupada. And as all yours, Prabhu.
You can hear me okay?
Very clear. Thank you.
Okay. Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Tanamane. Namaste Saraswati Deve Gaudavana Pacharane Nivishesha Shunyavadi Paschatadeshtarane Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaur Bhaktivinoda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Bhagavad Gita, chapter 2, text 27. Jata Shahi Dhruvo Mrityur Dhruvam Janma Mritasya Cha Tasmat Apariharyerte Na Tvam Sochitum Arhasi. One who has taken his birth is sure to die, and after death one is sure to take birth again. Therefore, in the unavoidable discharge of your duty, you should not lament. Report. One has to take birth according to one's activities of life. And after finishing one term of activities, one has to die to take birth for the next. In this way, one is going through one cycle of birth and death after another without liberation. This cycle of birth and death does not, however, support unnecessary murder, slaughter, and war. But at the same time, violence and war are inevitable factors in human society for keeping law and order. The Battle of Kurukshetra, being the will of the Supreme, was an inevitable event. And to fight for the right cause is the duty of a Kshatriya. Why should he be afraid of or aggrieved at the death of his relatives, since he was discharging his proper duty? He did not deserve to break the law, thereby becoming subjected to the reactions of sinful acts, of which he was so afraid. By avoiding the discharge of his proper duty, he would not be able to stop the death of his relatives, and he would be degraded due to his selection of the wrong path of action. Text 28. Avyaktadini bhutani vyaktat madhyani bharata avyakta nidayanyeva tatraka paridevana. All created beings are unmanifest in their beginning, manifest in their interim state, and unmanifest again when annihilated. So what need is there for lamentation? Purport. Accepting that there are two classes of philosophers, one believing in the existence of the soul and the other not believing in the existence of the soul. There is no cause for lamentation in either case. Non-believers in the existence of the soul are called atheists by followers of Vedic wisdom. Yet even if, for argument's sake, we accept this atheistic theory, there is still no cause for lamentation. Apart from the separate existence of the soul, the material elements remain unmanifested before creation. From this subtle state of non-manifestation comes manifestation, just as from ether, air is generated. From air, fire is generated. From fire, water is generated. And from water, earth becomes manifested. From the earth, many varieties of manifestations take place. Take, for example, a big skyscraper manifested from the earth. When it is dismantled, the manifestation becomes again unmanifested and remains as atoms in the ultimate stage. The law of conservation of energy remains, but in course of time, things are manifested and unmanifested. That is the difference. Then what cause is there for lamentation, either in the stage of manifestation or in unmanifestation? Somehow or other, even in the unmanifested stage, things are not lost. Both at the beginning and at the end, all elements remain unmanifested, and only in the middle are they manifested. And this does not make any real material difference. And if we accept the Vedic conclusion as stated in the Bhagavad Gita, that these material bodies are perishable in due course of time, antavanta ime deha, but that the soul is eternal, nityas yokta saririna, then we must remember always that the body is like a dress. Therefore, why lament the changing of a dress? The material body has no factual existence in relation to the eternal soul. It is something like a dream. In a dream, we may think of flying in the sky or sitting on a chariot as a king. But when we wake up, we can see that we're neither in the sky nor seated on the chariot. The Vedic wisdom encourages self-realization on the basis of the non-existence of the material body. Therefore, in either case, whether one believes in the existence of the soul or one does not believe in the existence of the soul, there is no cause for lamentation for loss of the body. Text 29. Ascharyavat paschati kaschideinam, ascharyavat vadati tataiva chanyam, ascharyavat anya shrinoti, shrutva pyenam veda nachaiva kaschit. Some look on the soul as amazing. Some describe him as amazing. And some hear of him as amazing, while others, even after hearing about him, cannot understand him at all. Purport. Since Gita Upanishad is largely based on the principles of the Upanishads, it is not surprising to also find this passage in the Katha Upanishad 1.2.7. Shravanapyapi bahubir, no. Shravanayapi bahubir yonalabhya Shrinvantipi bahavo yamna vidyu Ascharya vakta kushalo shalabdha Ascharyo syat gyata kushalanushita. The fact that the atomic soul is within the body of a gigantic animal in the body of a gigantic banyan tree, and also in the microbic germs, millions and billions of which occupy only an inch of space, is certainly very amazing. Men with a poor fund of knowledge and men who are not austere cannot understand the wonders of the individual atomic spark of spirit, even though it is explained by the greatest authority of knowledge, who imparted lessons even to Brahma, the first living being in the universe. Owing to a gross material conception of things, most men in this age cannot imagine how such a small particle can become both so great and so small. Some men look at the soul proper as wonderful, either by constitution or by description. Illusioned by the material energy, people are so engrossed in subject matters for sense gratification that they have very little time to understand the question of self-understanding, even though it is a fact that without this self-understanding, all activities result in ultimate defeat in the struggle for existence. Perhaps they have no idea that one must think of the soul and thus make a solution to the material miseries. Some people who are inclined to hear about the soul may be attending lectures in good association, but sometimes, owing to ignorance, they are misguided by acceptance of the super soul and the atomic soul as one without a distinction or of magnitude. It is very difficult to find a man who perfectly understands the position of the super soul, the atomic soul, their respective functions and relationships, and all other major and minor details. And it is still more difficult to find a man who has actually derived full benefit from knowledge of the soul and who is able to describe the position of the soul in different aspects. But if somehow or other one is able to understand the subject matter of the soul, then one's life is successful. The easiest process for understanding the subject matter of self, however, is to accept the statements of the Bhagavad Gita spoken by the greatest authority, Lord Krishna, without being deviated by other theories. But it also requires a great deal of penance and sacrifice, either in this life or in the previous ones, before one is able to accept Krishna as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Krishna can, however, be known as such by the causeless mercy of the pure devotee and by no other way. Text 30. Dehi nityam avadyoyam dehe sarvasya bharata tasmat sarvani bhutani natvam sochitum arhasi. O descendant of Bharata, he who dwells in the body can never be slain. Therefore, you need not grieve for any living being. Purport. The Lord now concludes the chapter of instruction on the immutable spirit soul. In describing the immortal soul in various ways, Lord Krishna establishes that the soul is immortal and the body is temporary. Therefore, Arjuna, as a Kshatriya, should not abandon his duty out of fear that his grandfather and teacher, Bhishma and Drona, will die in the battle. On the authority of Shri Krishna, one has to believe that there is a soul different from the material body, not that there is no such thing as soul, or that living symptoms develop at a certain stage of material maturity, resulting from the interaction of chemicals. Though the soul is immortal, violence is not encouraged, but at the time of war, it is not discouraged when there is actual need for it. That need must be justified in terms of the sanction of the Lord and not capriciously. Text 31. Sudharmamapi cha viksha na vikampitum arhasi dharmyadi judachcheyon yat chatriyasya navidyate. Considering your specific duty as a Kshatriya, you should know that there is no better engagement for you than fighting on religious principles. And so there is no need for hesitation. Purport. Out of the 4 orders of social administration, the second order for the matter of good administration is called Kshatriya. Chat means hurt. One who gives protection from harm is called Kshatriya Trayate, to give protection. The Kshatriyas are trained for killing in the forest. A Kshatriya would go into the forest and challenge a tiger face to face and fight with the tiger with his sword. When the tiger was killed, it would be offered the royal order of cremation. This system has been followed even up to the present day by the Kshatriya kings of Jaipur state. The Kshatriyas are specially trained for challenging and killing, because religious violence is sometimes a necessary factor. Therefore, Kshatriyas are never meant for accepting directly the order of sannyas or renunciation. Nonviolence in politics may be a diplomacy, but it is never a factor or principle. In the religious law books, it is stated, ahave shumato nyanyam, jigam santo mahishata, yudamana param shaktya, swargam yant yuparan mukha, yageshu pasavo brahman, kanyate satatam dujai, samskrita kila mantraischa, tepi swargam avap nuvam. In the battlefield, a king or Kshatriya, while fighting another king envious of him, is eligible for achieving the heavenly planets after death, as the Brahmanas also attain the heavenly planets by sacrificing animals in the sacrificial fire, end quote. Therefore, killing on the battlefield on religious principles and killing animals in the sacrificial fire are not at all considered to be acts of violence, because everyone is benefited by the religious principles involved. The animal sacrificed gets a human life immediately without undergoing the gradual evolutionary process from one form to another. And the Kshatriyas killed on the battlefield also attain the heavenly planets, as do the Brahmanas who attain them by offering sacrifice. There are two kinds of swadharmas, specific duties. As long as one is not liberated, one has to perform the duties of his particular body in accordance with religious principles in order to achieve liberation. When one is liberated, one's swadharma, specific duty, becomes spiritual, and it is not in the material bodily concept. In the bodily conception of life, there are specific duties for the Brahmanas and Kshatriyas respectively. And these duties are unavoidable. Such swadharma is ordained by the Lord, and this will be clarified in the 4th chapter. On the bodily plane, swadharma is called varnashrama dharma, or man's stepping stone for spiritual understanding. Human civilization begins from the stage of varnashrama dharma, or specific duties in terms of the specific modes of nature of the body obtained. Discharging one's specific duty in any field of action in accordance with the orders of higher authorities serves to elevate one to a higher status of life. Text 32. Yadrichaya chopapannam swargadhvaram apavritam shukina chatriya partha lavante judam idrisham. O Partha, happy are the Kshatriyas to whom such fighting opportunities come unsought, opening for them the doors of the heavenly planets. Purport. As supreme teacher of the world, Lord Krishna condemns the attitude of Arjuna, who said, quote, I do not find any good in this fighting. It will cause perpetual habitation in hell, end quote. Such statements by Arjuna were due to ignorance only. He wanted to become nonviolent in the discharge of his specific duty. For a Kshatriya to be on the battlefield and to become nonviolent is the philosophy of fools. In the Parashara, Smriti, or religious codes made by Parashara, the great sage and father of Vyasadeva, it is stated, Kshatriyo hi praja rakshan, shastra pani pradandayan, nirjitya para sainyadhi, sitim dharmena palayet. The Kshatriya's duty is to protect the citizens from all kinds of difficulties. And for that reason, he has to apply violence in suitable cases for law and order. Therefore, he has to conquer the soldiers of inimical kings, and thus, with religious principles, he should rule over the world, end quote. Considering all aspects, Arjuna had no reason to refrain from fighting. If he should conquer his enemies, he would enjoy the kingdom. And if he should die in the battle, he would be elevated to the heavenly planets, whose doors were wide open to him. Fighting would be for his benefit in either case. Text 33. Ata chetvam imam dharmyam sangramam na karishyatsi tata swadharmam kirtim cha hitva papam avapshusi. If, however, you do not perform your religious duty of fighting, then you will certainly incur sins for neglecting your duties and thus lose your reputation as a fighter. Purport. Arjuna was a famous fighter, and he attained fame by fighting many great demigods, including even Lord Shiva. After fighting and defeating Lord Shiva in the dress of a hunter, Arjuna pleased the Lord and received as a reward a weapon called Pashupata Astra. Everyone knew he was a great warrior. Even Dronacharya gave him benedictions and awarded him the special weapon by which he could kill even his teacher. So he was credited with so many military certificates from many authorities, including his adoptive father Indra, the heavenly king. But if he abandoned the battle, not only would he neglect his specific duty as a Kshatriya, but he would lose all his fame and good name and thus prepare his royal road to hell. In other words, he would go to hell not by fighting, but by withdrawing from the battle. So we'll stop there since it's 6:19. See if we have any comments or questions from anyone. Would happily try to share and discuss if you like.
Thank you so much, Prabhu, for such a nice reading. And definitely, for me, it sounds very philosophical and historical. A lot of understanding and philosophy, of course, and also trying to make it, how it applies to us in our everyday life. So thank you so much for reading that. Would like to ask devotees, if you have any questions, any comments, or any clarification that you would need, please do not hesitate. Do either raise your hand or jump right in. Looking down the list here. Okay, Prabhu, I can ask a question. And as you were reading the verses, what was coming to my mind is my limited knowledge. Srila Prabhupada is explaining, the position of one's specific duty.
Yes.
I mean, he talked about Kshatriya, he talked about the different, and he talked about the 4 orders of the administration. And sometimes we, as human nature, we kind of get sidetracked by what is our specific duty, because we are so caught up with so much of all that kind of stuff. And it happened to Arjuna too.
Yeah.
And we are definitely living, every day we are like the many Arjunas in our lives. How can we really know what is the right specific duty, Prabhu? Like how, how can we know?
It's interesting. Well, it's interesting because I just read the same verses on our Bhagavad Gita study group in Atlanta on Sunday. So same points came up about Swadharma, and then how that relates to the Varnashram, and how that relates to while you're in the material sphere and when you become liberated. So what are your duties when you're in the material sphere, and what are the duties when you become liberated? So for a devotee, the safest path is there's different ways you can say, but like when you say Mahajino Yenigatasa Panta, Panta meaning like the steps of the path. So following the footsteps of great personalities. For instance, if you're in a minefield and you have an expert that knows how to navigate the minefield to avoid being blown up, and the smartest thing to do is just follow his big footprints. So for us, what's the safest path? Follow the big footprints of Srila Prabhupada, who followed the footprints of Bhakti Siddhanta, who followed the footprints of, Gorkishore, like so on and so forth, all the way back to Krishna, because Lord Krishna gave it to Brahma. Tene Brahma Hridaya Adhikavaye. And Brahma received the knowledge because he did the right thing. He performed austerity. He heard that sound, tapa. And he said, he did that sacrifice for 1,000 years of the demigod, something like that. I mean, that number is unlimited. So he received the blessing of the Lord, and the Lord personally guided him. So that system, parampara, is the personal guidance of the Lord, carefully handed down. Therefore, in the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 434, Krishna concludes by saying, or doesn't conclude the chapter, but he says, just try to learn the truth by approaching a spiritual master. So the question may become, wait a minute, my spiritual master is not present. How can I do it? Well, Arjuna heard from Krishna in the battlefield of Kurukshetra. So I can make the argument, he was directly in front of Krishna. That's how he was able to make the proper decision. Krishna's not in front of me now. What am I supposed to do? Krishna comes in two ways. He's a spiritual master from without and a spiritual master from within. He's a Lord in front of us. He's giving us the Bhagavad Gita, and he's also coming in the form of the spiritual master. Also, not only just the spiritual master, but those who actually follow the spiritual master can give the same knowledge. And that's why it's important that we do not deviate from the strict understanding. How do we get that strict understanding? Scrutinizingly studying Prabhupada's books. Very, very important. And repeatedly, over and over and over. Srila Prabhupada says, where is it? In this chapter, the 12th, that this may sound like repetition, but for understanding, repetition is important. So we should read these books over and over and over until we get it, because we hadn't gotten it yet. Why Prabhupada keeps talking about you're not the body? Because we still hadn't gotten that yet. It's like hadn't sunk in yet. So then to navigate the minefield of material existence, one should follow in the footsteps of great authorities, serve the great authorities, find those devotees that you feel confident are not deviating from the strict path given by Srila Prabhupada. So before you take that next step, you make a check, you ask someone. I was discussing that the other day in Philadelphia. One devotee was asking a question similar to this, and I didn't get a chance to go deep into it because we were at the end of the class, but the point that was being made was, when I have to do something and what should I do? Same kind of question, and I said, well, before you do something, you should have some devotees that you can consult with. So the person said, well, I'm not talking about big projects. So the fine point of that is, I'm not talking about big projects either. I'm talking about the way you assume or conclude something. Don't act on it until you check it. Suppose you have an idea about something you read and you run off and you don't start doing it. But then you end up going, oh, wow. 2 months later, 1 year later, 3 years later, you realize, wow, I misunderstood that. Well, the thing is, you should take the time to consult. For instance, your spiritual master, Bhattacharya, when I had an idea about doing some preaching in Atlanta, interesting preaching, was preaching to the UFO community. So I was kind of hesitant, but I had an opportunity. I was invited to do so many things. So I said, I don't know what to do. Let me call one of my friends, Bhattacharya. I said, Maharaj, this is what's happening, da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And I read this one book. It's called Aliens Among Us. And Maharaj said, Balabhadra, I bought that same book yesterday. Because I'm looking into this whole idea, because they're talking about extraterrestrials and we talk about the same thing in our books. So when he gave me that insight, that blessing, I got involved and made big progress. In fact, one of the ladies who was a leader in that group, she put me in her book because I told her about Garuda. And she said, that's my spirit guide. Point I'm trying to make is, I took the time to measure twice and cut once. In other words, I checked it out first to make sure I'm on the right path, and then I proceeded. And that's happened to me so many times. Like when I started preaching in the interfaith community, I checked with at least 7 or 8 devotees, Bhattacharya Maharaj, Satsrup Maharaj, Hridayananda Maharaj, so many devotees on something I was thinking, not some project I'm trying to build. So my point is, even something as basic as what you think about the philosophy, I would say to be safe, check with an experienced devotee, unless you're 100% sure. Most cases, we're not 100% sure if we're right. Okay. So I would highly recommend that you have that circle of trusted advisors that you can check your mindset with, not just a project thing. We get so caught up in projects and things we're going to do. Yeah, I'm going to ask a devotee, is this good or bad? That's fine. You should do that too. But the way we think, which guides our activities, is even more important. So please take that, and that's what I do. I practice it almost every day. It keeps me out of trouble most of the time. So I hope that helped a little bit. I think someone has a hand up. That's Devendra.
Dear Krishna.
Oh, is that Dear Krishna?
Yes, he didn't change his name, but he'll change it.
Change his
Hare
name.
Krishna, Prabhu, please
Hi,
accept.
Prabhu. Good to hear your voice.
All glories to you. Thank you for wonderful reading. Sorry, Prabhu, actually my name, I sometimes use Zoom for my work calls also, so I have to.
No
use
problem.
that name.
Beautiful
So,
name. Beautiful name.
Thank you. Prabhu, wonderful reading, and just the way you were answering the last question, it brought up so many good points. So I was just trying to understand it better. Like Lord Krishna also says in Bhagavad Gita, Yad Yad Acharati Shrestha, like you were
Yes.
mentioning, that we have to follow the Mahajans. And for us, Mahajans are our spiritual masters, our senior devotees, and somebody who is fixed in the path of bhakti. So I always wonder, that question always bothers me. How can I make sure that I'm approaching the right authority? Like,
Yeah.
because if I'm not fixed in my path, or if my mind is not clear, I might not be getting attracted to the right authority. I hope you are able to understand the question.
Oh, no, I totally understand.
Yeah.
It's called the onus of proof is on you. What that means is that you have to know the philosophy to know when someone's not speaking correctly the philosophy. You follow? If you haven't taken the time to study carefully, someone can come along and say something, and it sounds really nice because, the language or the intonation or the way they look and dress, and you could be going down the wrong path. So if you know, like I said from the beginning, you read Prabhupada's books, you study his books, and you do devotional service, because Krishna, he's the deciding factor. Bhajitam priti purvakam, dadami buddhi yogam. Krishna will protect you. He'll give you the understanding. He'll make it possible for you to decipher what's good and what's bad. But if you don't take the time to really read these books repeatedly, and I'm saying to you from a historical perspective, it has happened so many times in our movement where devotees who were supposed to be on such elevated positions have totally misguided large numbers of devotees. Large numbers, not small, even up to the point of guru. We won't get into all the gory details. But because devotees were sentimental about their understanding, and the person looked a certain way, sounded a certain way, had achieved so many different things. If you're not following Srila Prabhupada, if you're studying Prabhupada's books, then you can detect when someone is kind of off track. But you won't be critical necessarily, but you'll know how to filter the information. I'll give you an example. 1970, what was it, 77 or 78? Some sannyasis came through America and they told all the brahmacharis, you're going to all fall down. It's Maya. The women are going to drag you down. You should leave the temple and follow us. And I'm not saying that with any kind of relish, but each one of those sannyasis fell down. Each one of those who were telling everyone you're going to fall down, they all fell down because it was not the proper philosophy. Prabhupada never said anything like that. You stay in the temple, you're going to fall down because of the women. What? If you respect the women, you fall up. You become more exalted. If you respect the women, not only ISKCON women, but the women in general, you blossom. So we were smart enough. In fact, they were saying to me, oh, Balabhadra, come on, we'll make you a sannyasi. I said, really? I don't want to be a sannyasi anyway. But they were trying to entice us away from the temples. But somehow or another, my temple president trained us so well in the philosophy that I could detect this is not correct. And I refused. So that's my point, dear Krishna Prabhu, that if we study carefully, then we'll know how to filter information we're getting. When we ask someone for advice, we'll see if that advice is right and in line with Srila Prabhupada's teachings. We'll always be respectful, but we may not follow that advice if it doesn't follow Srila Prabhupada's standards. So that's how I understand it.
Thank you so much. I will really request you to write an article on this topic, because the way you summed it up and closed the loop, that eventually the responsibility lies on me.
Yes.
I cannot get away from that responsibility for my spiritual life. And that's how the Srila Prabhupada also explained, you have to fly your own plane.
Mm.
So
You
thank you
should
so
write the
much.
article. I like it. Fly your own plane. That's a great article.
But if you get a chance, please write a short article on this question, because I'm sure a lot of devotees had this question, how to make sure their authorities are the right authority. Thank you, Prabhu.
Thank you. Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
That is a nice title of the article, bro. Fly your own plane. It reminds me of my father. He used to tell us, I cannot earn your salvation. You have to work to earn your own salvation.
Wow, powerful.
Yeah. He always used to tell us that no one can save you. You got to save yourself. So yeah, that's a nice one. Thank you for that nice question there, Krishna. Very nice. Any other questions from devotees? I know we just passed the 6:30 mark, but just want to give devotees a chance if you have any questions, any comments. And if you don't, thank you so much, Prabhu, for such a wonderful reading and such a nice discussion. Thank you to all the devotees for joining us. Vantrakaputabhyascha kripasindavevacha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Srila Prabhupada ki
Jai
jai.
Prabhupada.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Thank you.